All right, what's going on, everybody? Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Lambdas Who Roll Live. I'm here with my two co-hosts, Fernando and Diego. What's going on, guys?
What's going on, Barcia?
Yeah,
I
para
said been
siempre,
doing
man.
good. How's everybody?
Everybody's good. Everybody's good. All right, so let's get into it, man. Right away, we have a special guest who's beloved to us, right? He's one of our senior black belts in our fraternity. We're honored to have him today. So we want to welcome Professor Omar Delgado. What's going on, brother? How are you?
What's up, brothers? Para siempre. Glad
That's,
to be here.
that's what's up, man. So man, I'm glad to have you on the show today, man. This is exciting for me because it's our first time we have a black belt on our show. So we've had a couple other hermanos who are lower in the ranks, kind of hear their perspectives because of certain specializations or because of an event. We had Brandon on because of ECE, but today we have you on, and we're looking forward to hearing your story and your perspective, your mindset as a black belt, not just as just any black belt, under legendary. A legend, MMA legend, and BJJ legend, Vitor Shaolin. And so we want to hear all about that today. But before we begin, we want to get to know a little bit about you and how you came into LUL. So, share with us how that happened.
All right, Pat. So I guess just a little background about me. Again, born and raised in the Bronx. I went to school at University of Pennsylvania back in '99. And at that time, again, not a lot of Latinos on Penn's campus, so real easy to feel, sort of marginalized on campus. And luckily, I had a roommate of mine who eventually became my line brother when we pledged, who was also from New York. And so that was kind of my boy sort of holding me down on campus for the first, year and a half. But as I spent more time on campus and started to meet more people, I met a couple of old school brothers, one in particular, Ramon Marmalejos from my chapter, who began telling me and my roommate a little more about LUL, and just encouraged us. He didn't really push us, just encouraged us to come to some of the events and to get to know some of the other brothers. And so we ended up starting to do that, and right away sort of the vibe started clicking. We enjoyed some of the events that they hosted, not only on Penn's campus, but they were also doing events at the time on Drexel and Temple's campus. And so gave us a good opportunity to kind of meet other people from some of the surrounding schools in the Philadelphia area. And so from there, I think the relationship just progressed to the point where we started to get more interested and decided, why don't we give it a try? And so we ended up pledging spring 2001. So that was my sophomore year at Penn, and then really once we crossed, we had 2 more years on campus to continue to carry the banner and to promote the not only the fraternity, but just getting more involved, with some of the different activities and also working with some of the other Greeks on campus was just a rewarding experience, man. One that I always look back on and I'm grateful for.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, black belt. I think you are the second black belt in the frat, right? I mean, we have Lambdas Who Roll. We started this, I think we said back in 2016, and at that point, me and my brother didn't really know that there was so many hermanos training jiu-jitsu. I know that we knew that you were training. We knew Lewis was training because you guys were very active on social media. We ran into you a couple of times at competitions. I remember one time we went to the Big Apple Open, and as we were heading home, you were going to the event. I don't think you competed that weekend. I think you were just going to go support. But that's when I realized that you trained. We ran into you. I think you probably were like a purple belt at the time. And so, but you are the second black belt in the fraternity, out of a number of us that are training now. I think we have like about 30 so people on the roster right now from hermanos that train. So we want to hear about your story. How did you come to learn about jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and where'd you get started?
Got it. Yeah, man. So really, I started jiu-jitsu back in 2010 is really when I started training. I think prior to that, really, I was, this was sort of my years after I graduated and sort of post-step team kind of fraternity activities. At the time, I was working out a lot, but just finding it after a period of time, just tough to continue going to the gym to keep pushing yourself. I'm a competitive person, I think, by nature, and so that was sort of lacking in just going to the gym and working out all the time. And at the time, I had been watching a lot of UFC. So I was really interested in UFC, watching guys like GSP and some of the other stars fighting. So I always had some interest in it. I had done a little bit of boxing, not much prior to that, but I always wanted to learn more about it. And so at the time I was working on the west side of Manhattan, down at the New York Times building, which is right near Times Square. And so as I started to look at different programs in schools, I noticed that Shaolin School was just a couple blocks away. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because it's in one of those corporate buildings on the second floor, so it's really easy to walk by the school and not even know that there's a jiu-jitsu school there. It's on the second floor, kind of in the back. Yeah. And so I found it online, and that sort of piqued my interest. So I said, let me pop by at some point and check it out. And so I did. I signed up for a trial class just to see what was going on. Did the trial class and immediately, got interested. And so that was really sort of the beginning of the journey. I think I bumped into like maybe one or two bros at the time that had been training there. I hadn't met Adam yet there. Obviously, I knew him from the frat before jiu-jitsu, but there were a couple other bros that were randomly sort of training there or also checking it out. So that was sort of a nice welcome as I kind of entered the school and started to train.
Did those bros who you met they stuck around?
And they did not. Right? So like one of them, in fact, ironically, was my line brother Chris Padilla, who was there early. And came through a couple classes, and then unfortunately did not stick around. I think he did get injured at some point, and then just never came back.
Yeah, it would have been a black belt, man.
Definitely would have, man. And that's you see that a lot. I saw that even with some higher belts. Blue belts, purple belts that were training when I was a white belt. And then for whatever reason, just as I kept coming to class, you started to notice people falling off or disappearing. And so it's definitely a long, hard grind, but I think if you stick with it, it's definitely rewarding.
So also, you mentioned that there was a couple bros. Did you feel that helped you like make attending classes a little bit easier, knowing that you had like that camaraderie there with like a couple hermanos?
Yeah, definitely, bro. It was definitely a welcome experience. At Shaolin's, he's got sort of a diverse group of students. You've got the corporate sort of business students that kind of come by or are not really interested necessarily in competing or becoming high level, but are doing it more so for the fitness aspect of it, and just to kind of keep themselves busy. And then you've got a different contingent of folks that were all about competition and that were training, 5-6 times a week, really pushing themselves, that were also there. And so trying to fit in, to the group, at least early on, was something a little bit difficult, right? And so I think having some bros there early on certainly helped with that as I got started.
True. So we were talking a little bit before we actually got on the chat on the broadcast. And you mentioned that that right now you injured your finger, and you just mentioned before that the injury to Chris may have been one of the reasons why he didn't continue. Being in jiu-jitsu for so long, almost over a decade right now. What advice would you give to brothers now who are just starting, or maybe where they're blue belts and they're purple belts, and could potentially run into an issue where they get injured and then they're on that fence like, oh man, should I stop? Should I continue? What advice would you give them so they can kind of get over that? And because we don't want to lose anybody, right? We want everybody to
for sure. Well, I think what I would say about that is, the jiu-jitsu journey, especially now that I'm a black belt, is full of highs and lows, man. And some of those lows, at least for me, did come off of injuries. I when I was a blue belt, I broke my toe rolling, And for me back then, that was a big deal, right? Because not only did that take me off my feet, but I couldn't dance the same immediately once I started to come back. Obviously I was in a boot for 2-3 months. It happened during the winter time too, so it was cold out, snowing, and so it was always tough. And I think one of the things that kind of motivated me to just come back was at that point I already had like 2.5 years in. And I just had to look past the injury and think about just the other benefits that I was getting from the training. Not only meeting other people, because I think throughout my jiu-jitsu journey, that's been one of the most rewarding experiences. Is just meeting a lot of different people with diverse backgrounds, but also the discipline that I was starting to develop. And training several times during the week and keeping sort of true to my fitness goals. Back then, and noticing that certainly in jiu-jitsu as well as in MMA, this is just part of the journey. Right. It happens, and I remember Shaolin talking a little bit about it during one of his famous post-class speeches, to not let injuries kind of set you back. You can always use that time to work on other things, whether it's studying the game, watching film, clips. There was a period of time, just after the injury where, I missed it so much that I would come back and literally sit and watch class, and have to be able to participate just to kind of see some of the technique and see some of the guys that I've been training with. And so, I mean, my advice is again, it's just, I would consider it sort of a speed bump, if you will, in the journey. At some point, hopefully not anyone gets any serious injuries, because I luckily, breaking a toe compared to other injuries you can get in the sport, I think is relatively manageable. But you got to continue to push through it, because it is part of the sport. It's a contact sport. It's rough. But I think if you treat your body well and you train hard, any injuries you should be able to overcome, and with the goal of continuing to train, not just until black belt, but beyond, right? Continuing to grow and learn in the sport, because I do think that it's kind of a lifelong journey.
Absolutely.
Oh, I think we'll probably question that, being that you brought up the whole dancing thing. But I do have a question, man. Like, you started off with Shaolin, right? And you went all the way through, right? From white all the way to black. Like, was that a conscious decision? Was that something that you decided from that moment that you were like, what, I'm going to stick around with this professor? Maybe you knew about his accolades, beforehand or whatnot, but what was that mindset when it came to that? Because obviously we know that, a lot of people start off and they change and they go around different schools for many different reasons, right? But what was your mindset on that?
Well, so I mean, my mindset, I think initially wasn't to stay. I honestly didn't necessarily have aspirations to be black belt right away. I started training and enjoyed just the training and the fitness aspect of it. But I tell you, the first few years of jiu-jitsu, which I'm sure many of you can appreciate, are just tough, man. You're training a lot, you're learning a lot, but for whatever reason, you're not necessarily connecting the dots yet. So you go through a lot of classes where you're getting smashed or just things are not going your way.
Yeah,
it's frustrating. It's one of those things that you have to just continue to push through. And that was something that I had to deal with a lot, early on, until, probably blue belt till, really late blue belt, purple belt, when you feel like you have an idea of what, what's going on and you kind of know what to do. But I mean, I think throughout my journey, there were moments where, I felt like I wasn't progressing. And I think inevitably you start to think about when you encounter those moments, am I at the right school, or maybe, do I need to go somewhere else to maybe learn the more modern jiu-jitsu, right? Because Shaolin, I think, is a little bit more old school, right? He's an older school black belt. He really stresses the fundamentals more so than anything else. But he's still super high level, man. Really, really good. And I think, once I got to my purple belt, that's when I really began to appreciate Shaolin a little more. Not that I didn't during my earlier belts, but I think earlier on, because classes are so big, you don't get to know Shaolin as well, and I think once you demonstrate that you're here to stay and that you're devoted, that's when he begins to really, really recognize you and take a little bit more responsibility and working with you one-on-one. And so, I remember my purple belt was probably the first time that I ever rolled with Shaolin, and so that is when you start to realize and experience, what training with him and rolling with him is like, and that was a humbling experience because I'm naturally a little bit bigger than him, and so I thought that at that point I thought, hey, I know what I'm doing. I should be able to connect this, and so I went at him aggressively, and it didn't go well.
So,
Rude awakening.
I mean, was that like you started rolling with him, you getting that connection. Was that like a motivator for you from that point? Also, was
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there were still other really good guys in class, you know what I mean? And so there were always different levels of motivation, but seeing kind of how he did it was just unlike anyone else, right? I mean, it almost seemed like it was effortless, that he was kind of throwing me around the mat, getting tapped 2 or 3 times in a roll. Whereas, when you're rolling with other belts, I wasn't really seeing that happen. And so that was something that was sort of eye-opening for me, and it really sort of made me realize that there's definitely levels to this, and while I'm getting better, there's still a long, long way to go. And so, I mean that did continue to motivate me, even beyond purple belt. It's just getting the chance to roll with him, getting the feedback from him, and then trying to learn with each roll, so that hopefully I wasn't making the same mistakes more than once, and trying to switch up the roll too, which sometimes was difficult, right? Because I would always find myself, I would start on top and then immediately, within a minute would get swept, and all of a sudden I'm on my back trying to play guard, and so that was tough, where that would happen so often that at points I would roll with him and would just try to focus on not getting swept, but at that point I was sort of neglect trying to pass, I was playing more of a defensive game on top, which is obviously not something you want to do. And so, but yeah, man, I mean, it was all great experience from purple belt onward. But there were moments where, like I said earlier, I questioned whether or not Shaolin's was the right school. I think at that point Unity had started to open up, and that was becoming a popular school in and around the city. So there was a little bit of buzz around that, and we even had some guys that left Shaolin's to train there. And so I think it was at that time it was tough for me to kind of figure out what the best path was for me. I had to come to terms with where I wanted to be, and I had to make that decision because I think Shaolin was very particular about that. And so I ultimately said, you know what? I mean, I like it here. I like the people. I enjoy training with Shaolin, and so I'm here to stay. I think that really helped me get to where I am today, as far as becoming a black belt and a competitive one.
Yeah, was the proximity to where you were? I think you said where you were working. Was that a big factor, or did you kind of know who he was already? Because he's a very popular person, in the
Right.
MMA scene. I mean, he's ADCC vet. He's won worlds, I think, like 4 or 5 times. Did you kind of know about this? Or I mean, is that something when you were Googling or when you were like researching, you're like, hey, this guy's legit. Let me go into it. Or even because of you were watching UFC or any MMA knowledge that you had at that point. Did you know about that?
Yeah, so honestly, when I Googled them, I didn't know about it, right? I said, oh man, this school, I didn't realize this school is so close to where I'm working, and then I saw his sort of picture on the flyer, which looked pretty cool. And then as I scrolled down, I started to see kind of a little bit more about his MMA accolades and highlights. And so that's when I started to jump on YouTube and say, hey, let me find out a little bit more about this guy, right? And so I started to see some of his younger years where he was fighting in Cage Rage and some of the other promotions, winning titles and choking guys out. And so there was definitely a lot of I think motivation for me once I saw that to say, wow, let me and the fact that he's so close, like it was sort of a no-brainer for me to at least try and check out. I mean, there's at the time Unity wasn't open yet too. I think the other big name that folks probably would recognize was Marcelo, who was also obviously had a big school in the city. But just logistically, it would have been tough for me to try to go there, after work and make it to class on time. And so that's what sort of tipped me into trying Shaolin's out. And then honestly, the vibe there, I enjoyed. And like I said, once I ran into a couple bros, I was like, you know what, let me stick with this. Let me check it out, and we'll see what happens.
Nice.
So, so because of, we're talking about, this, someone of this caliber, you're training with someone like Shaolin, someone who's coming in, and we've had these questions beforehand in other episodes. Someone who's coming in doesn't know anything about jiu-jitsu. Should they be looking at that? Should they be looking at someone of that rank? Or how should they approach maybe their first class or researching a class? Because you go on Google now, you get a whole bunch of lists now, and even sometimes you get jujitsu inside of other arts, right? Maybe some karate schools are doing jujitsu, taekwondo schools, and how can someone filter that out? You're Googling, you don't know what's going on. Well, what would your advice be on that?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, there's so much good jujitsu all around that I think, especially at white belt, and then for somebody just beginning, my advice is, just get started somewhere. If you're a bro and you're in the tri-state area, I don't see why you wouldn't come down to Roll Star to check it out if you're a little bit iffy or just want to learn more about it. You've got plenty of brothers that have been training long enough and that know the jiu-jitsu scene and know the jiu-jitsu community. And so I can't think of a better resource to try to leverage if you're a bro and you're interested. For other beginners, I think, there's always a little bit of a natural tendency to kind of know, hey, what are your coach's accolades and, what has he accomplished? And I think to some degree, like I said, that's natural. But, in the beginning stages, there's a lot of places that you can go to learn the fundamentals and get good. And ultimately, I think as I look back now, you don't necessarily have to train under a world-class coach to become, a high-level competitor. Like I said, there's a lot of other coaches who may not have won world titles, but have developed some really, really good students, not only here in New York, and I'm sure we go through the list, but just across the U.S., man, there's a lot of guys coming out of different schools that are really, really good. And I think I got to experience that firsthand, through my early belts. I was traveling a lot for work, and one of the things that I did often when I traveled was I would always bring my gi, and then no matter what hotel I was staying at, I would Google, hey, what are the nearby jiu-jitsu gyms to check out, and I would go and just check them out, and I was able to learn a lot, believe it or not, through some of those different visits to various gyms, and I've trained in a lot of different states, from California, Salt Lake City, Texas, Minneapolis,
Nice,
Florida. So I've been around and I've seen a lot. There's just a lot of good jiu-jitsu out there. I think it's definitely continues to evolve over time. New techniques, new approaches, new strategy. That comes about, and you see it. And so, my advice would be, it's just most important to get started. And once you get started, make sure you're training at a place that you're comfortable with, that you enjoy the vibe. Not all gym vibes are for everybody, depending on what your goals are. If you're looking to become a high-level competitor, there's some gyms that focus just on that, and then there's other gyms that focus on more of the fundamental, teaching you the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu and getting you to understand and comprehend those fundamentals in order to kind of build your game sort of from the ground up. But that's what's most important. I think that's what's going to keep you there is the vibe, the people, and the connection that you have with the instructor. And as long as you have that, the growth in jiu-jitsu to me is more about how much you train and then how much time you're putting into honing in those skills, whether that's drilling, challenging yourself and competing, and also trying to learn, from every one of those wins, losses, and training sessions. Because I think for me, just showing up to class, I think was important, but it just wasn't enough. I had to always put in more time to be able to connect some of the techniques, to be able to figure out, what style makes sense for my body type, and what's going to be most effective for me. That process takes time. It's not something that you discover or develop right away.
that's what's up. All right, let's take a quick commercial break to plug in our sponsor, Rollosophy. Shout out to them. All right. So you mentioned a couple things that really interesting. First, I wanted to ask you. You were talking about style and trying to find out, as you continue on your journey, what style was best suited for your body type. Was there anybody? Obviously, Shaolin is one,
Mhm.
one person that you were training with, and you said you were cross trained a little bit. But is there anybody that you looked at their game and said, "Hey, that's the type of game that I want to apply," and maybe started looking at videos or their competitions or whatever? Was there anybody in particular that you kind of looked up to?
Yeah, I mean, over time, there were several people that I looked up to and trying to figure out, like what my guard game is going to look like, and I mean, Shaolin, as an example, is somebody who obviously is famous for his butterfly guard,
Mm.
and that was something I tried early on and just had a lot of trouble with. I wasn't connecting, how to properly get under and get the right grips in order to kind of force some of the sweeps or engage in some of the different positions. And so, I think, once I looked past that, I had to figure out, okay, for me, so one of my training partners who was a senior training partner at the time, his name is Van Allen Flores. Shout out to Van. Suggested, hey, why don't you try De La Riva? And so I started, trying that guard a little bit, and I was mildly successful, once I started to learn a sweep or two and how to connect it. And then from there, just started to research, okay, who really plays De La Riva and what can I learn from some of those matches? And so one of the first folks that I started to study was a guy named Michael Langham, from Alliance. And he was really known for someone that is just really, really hard to pass his guard. Now, one thing you got to know about Michael is he's super flexible. Right. I unfortunately didn't have that characteristic. And so while studying him was useful, I had to kind of say, okay, I picked up some of the positions from and how he was reacting to certain things. But beyond that, I had to figure out who else could I look at and study to learn a little bit more. So once I sort of moved past Michael, I started to look at guys like Lucas Lepre as another guy who had a really, really solid guard game as well as really good top game and pressure. And so that was somebody that I studied, over time to try to learn a little bit more about, positioning and sort of efficient movement, if you will. And really that's how my De La Riva started to slowly and little by little get better. But man, there's been so many other guys that I've looked at and drawn inspiration from. I guess just to name a few, guys like Leandro Lowe, and watching him specifically for his top game and his passing, was always super inspirational for me. Shaolin also was really inspirational for me, particularly for his ability to transition from guard to come up really fast on single legs. I noticed that was one thing about him that was unique, that I also felt, often when rolling, whenever I would disengage or be too far back, he could come up off his back super fast and single leg me and put me down on the ground. And so that was something that I always sort of mentally thought, I got to incorporate that into my game at some point, right? Once I'm able to connect more of these De La Riva positions. And so, yeah, I think those were some of the guys that really influenced me early on, and then, once I got to brown and black, I started looking at other guys just for their intensity, so guys like Tim Spriggs and, Herbert Santos as examples were guys that were super intense on top and, always looking to pass and smash. And so those were just some guys that, again, that I drew inspiration from and watching them compete and watching some of their techniques on film.
Awesome. Man, I mean, because you brought it up, we'll take it back to, and we know, so if you want to share a little bit more about that, but like we know that you are someone who was really involved in, the strolling, the stepping, the dancing arena, both in the frat and outside as well. And we have some clips even at Roll Star, man, of you, busting down some moves. But with that, one, how has it's two different arts, right? One, like you mentioned, you got injured, your foot got injured, and then it affected something that you also enjoyed, something that you also love.
Right.
How was that balance? How did it help? Did it help in any way? What was that like, going back and forth?
Yeah, so I mean, I was dancing a lot in college, and right after college, both doing the step and stroll shows with a lot of different bros, and that was always a lot of fun, man. And it's still one of the sort of my secondary passions or hobbies. I don't dance as much anymore, but certainly still do from time to time. And a lot of the guys I was dancing with now have sort of moved on to become sort of professional dancers or kind of more industry level dancers. But I think for me, I would say the jujitsu probably hurt my dancing more than anything else, just because of the injuries. But I think the other way around, where the dancing may have helped, is I developed sort of strong ankles and strong legs to a degree, and so that helped. Later on in jujitsu, once we started doing things like foot locks and different joint locks on the feet. Because I always felt like I had good resistance to foot locks. And initially, when I didn't know how to escape, I had to rely a little bit on the ability for my foot to be able to take some of the pressure without immediately tapping, right? And that was something that I noticed was a little bit different than other people who sometimes you get them in a foot lock, and before you even applied the pressure, there was always this fear, right? And so people would tap right away. And I think Shaolin always pushed us to be able to develop some of that. And I think the dancing sort of helped me develop that a bit more naturally. And then, once I was able to combine that with learning some of the escapes from some of the various positions, then it made me more confident, particularly when I was going to compete, right? Because sometimes you did compete with guys that only specialized in leg locks or were always tapping other people with leg locks, knowing that I could go in and roll and not panic if I got caught in a foot lock, being able to escape. And so I'd say that's probably how it's helped, me most, throughout my jiu-jitsu journey. But, dancing always kept me active and moving and in shape, I guess, prior to jiu-jitsu. And so it lended itself well once I started training to just be more, faster on my feet and have good balance and coordination as well.
So I'm gonna put you a little bit on the spot. I'm gonna try to see if I can share that clip.
On
got,
Instagram?
Yeah, the one that we got you.
I think is posted it for a Friday vibe.
You guys see it?
Yeah.
All right, let's
Let's.
and man, you always had them moves. You and Laguna, man, and I'm like, man, how the heck can you guys do this stuff? It's like you got.
Can you get some audio? Is there audio on that?
There we go.
Because the audio makes a difference. There we go.
A little footwork after class.
That's how Omar warms up for class.
Good passing drills there. Well, man, I used to love dancing, man. Still do, but that's
awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's what's up, man.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, man. Just like anything else, just like jiu-jitsu, dancing. As you get better, you want to get even better, and then that's going to take more and more time. And so
that's cool, man. I mean, like, it's really tough, man, because I know a lot of people, they have that, right? They feel like, man, I got to give something up in order to do something else. We see that a lot with people doing other training with maybe other arts or maybe lifting weights or, again, something else that they're passionate about. But, it's nice when you're able to kind of mesh at least even one idea, with two things that you enjoy, even though obviously one is completely opposite. The injuries obviously affect the other, but that's awesome, man,
Yeah,
you still get down like on the. I mean, I answer that. I know I've seen it. You know what I mean? Like, but is it something that like talk about when it comes to the frat and a lot of these guys have strolls that are I don't know, man, really complicated nowadays in my eyes. Do you feel like you still get down, like you do a little stroll on the side? I'm
Well,
saying.
yeah, I'm still confident that I could. Still feel good about my ability to move, and I could probably keep up with a lot of the young guys. But yeah, man, a lot of the bros I used to stroll with now are dads. Shout out to
Dad
Fernando
bods.
and others. So they're probably not as man. Last time I strolled, I think was at my wedding. but but yeah, I mean, I used to love dancing. I still do to a degree. I just don't do it as much. And like I said, with anything else, as you, I think I struggled early on in the years trying to focus, on one thing because I was dancing, I was doing jujitsu, and then a lot of people probably don't know, but I did Muay Thai for like 4 or 5 years as well.
Nice.
While I was training jujitsu. And I love that as well. It was, but again, it's something that you need to put a lot of time in order to get good, And so I was just starting to get good, but what I found was it was starting to take away a little bit from the time I had to train jujitsu, right? So I had to on some days make a decision: am I going to train Muay Thai today, or am I going to do jujitsu? Because on the rare occasion where I did both, it was tough. It meant I was coming home at 10 o'clock at night, and just by the time you eat, it's already close to midnight. And so that was just tough to maintain. And so, after doing it for so many years, I decided, what, I always, enjoyed jujitsu a little bit more. And so I said, let me just spend more time focusing on my jujitsu. I can always come back to Muay Thai. But I found that, for me, at least in training under Shaolin, he always recommended, for those of us, that are interested in self-defense and learning about the hands that we should, right? Just beyond jujitsu, get some basic foundational knowledge of how to strike. And so that's what sort of piqued my interest in wanting to learn Muay Thai.
Nice.
So shifting gears a little bit in terms of you know, you've tried out, like you mentioned just now, Muay Thai, a little obviously it's striking art, jiu-jitsu, black belt. In that time, um yeah, I know the benefits that I have when I met you and you started coming into to teach with us, to help us, and to train with us. I can tell you, like, without not blowing smoke, man, and with training with you, like, you gave me a whole different perspective when it came to jujitsu, man. Like, from a purple belt, thinking one way, I had a whole mindset, from white to purple, and then I started training with you. The temperature started going up, started getting hotter, it started get like, but all these things like benefited me so much that when I went back to the school that I was training at, it was like, man, like, I'm not these guys that don't have the same, like, routine, same caliber, so I started seeing just the benefit just with you directly. How did you feel, from did teaching, did coaching, help, how was that like a benefit to you, and balancing, because now you were giving up 2 days of training from yourself, to be able to share and teach. So how was that balance?
Yeah, man. So I'll say, first off, I guess before I started teaching, right before I got my brown belt, Shaolin had sort of like a mentor program where he pairs up, guys getting ready to receive their brown belts with like, fresh white belts, or white belts that have a couple stripes that are preparing for blue. So we can start to develop. I mean, it's a way to kind of foster a bond between some of the lower belts and upper belts, but also it's sort of the beginning of trying to pave the way for some of the upper belts to learn some of the teaching aspects. And so I enjoyed kind of that process, right? I met some of the younger white belts coming up at Shaolin's and trying to explain to them and just answering questions and trying to reassure them that, look, I know everything's a little bit foggy right now, but the most important thing is to come in, continue training, because over time you'll be able to connect the dots a lot easier, and that comes just by showing up and continuing to train. So don't panic or feel like you don't know what you're doing. Just continue to focus on developing and learning a technique each and every time you come to class. So using that as sort of the foundation, when I started teaching at Roll Star, I tried to continue to kind of emulate that, and sort of the way I looked at it, trying to pass along sort of the Cliff Notes version of everything I had learned, at Shaolin's, in terms of, what were some of the techniques that I thought were going to be most fundamental, and what was the best way to develop those techniques. And to be honest, when I first started, I found it challenging, right? There were some things that I was naturally doing just by training so many years that sometimes you skip in explaining, so something as simple as like a hip escape, right? You drill that in the warm-ups, but then, when you go to hit a scissor sweep, that's a critical aspect of it, right? So I might do it as I was demonstrating it, but trying to make sure that I focused on that aspect of it to a complete beginner who doesn't understand the importance of it. Those were things that I needed to continue to focus on in order to help, those just beginning to learn some of the techniques a little bit easier. But I would say the teaching, it forced me to kind of focus and learn some of those aspects and realize that I was doing them, even if it was naturally from my years of training, to be able to pass it along and make sure that I was emphasizing some of those smaller details with regards to the techniques. But man, I'll say that it's helped me immensely over time. Now it's been a couple of years. Not only do I have kind of a deeper understanding of a lot of the different positions, right? But it's also kind of forced me, as I start to look at, okay, what do I want to cover today? You start to remember some of the things you forgot, right? Things that you went over years ago that it's probably somewhere in there, but because you haven't looked at it in a while, it's a little fuzzy. And so that's where certainly it's helped. And then just the rolling, right? When we roll with guys that obviously we've got some guys that Roll Star that are younger guys, physically fit, that are always looking to bring the heat. It was a good way for me to kind of continue to grow my training and not always have to use my A game all the time. Because when you go, when I was training at Shaolin's a lot, with a lot of the guys that were my level, you're always using your A game, right? To make sure that you're either smashing or defending. And I think there's definitely a place for that. But also, if you want to start to incorporate new techniques into the arsenal, it's tough to do that when you're rolling with Shaolin or other guys, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're still trying to figure out, the timing of the technique and maybe some of the details around it. And it's easier to do that when you're rolling with guys that are less experienced. So right. I think that aspect of it has certainly helped me kind of develop my game a little bit more to add more to the arsenal. And hopefully it's helped a lot of the guys that are coming up now where, I look at the white belts that we're developing and I'm like, damn, when I was a white belt, I wasn't nearly this good, or let alone able to kind of put the techniques together. And so, I'm certainly inspired by that. I think a lot of the coaching has certainly helped them develop even faster than let's say I did when I was a white belt. And that's certainly encouraging, and now I feel like, showing up to the competitions and seeing guys fight. Now I know what Shaolin used to go through when he would see us fight, right? We get a good position, and then, I know for me especially, in some matches I would get a good position but didn't know how to finish it or didn't know how to capitalize on it, right? And we see that sometimes now with our white belts. But we have a solid group of guys who are motivated, interested in training and continuing to push themselves. And that's the key. I think that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I passed along from my Shaolin experiences, pushing guys to show up every day, to ensure that they're training on a consistent basis. Those were all things that Shaolin stressed to us. And so I wanted to make sure that when I started teaching, I passed that along as well.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, Omar. So, like right now we're dealing with, the pandemic, COVID-19. How has that affected like your training, like within Shaolin or at Roll Star? And do you have any advice for, because we had a question last week from Hermano Jesse Mejia, who kind of had like reservations, especially like, with his kids, like jumping into jiu-jitsu during these times, and even like for himself as well. So, do you have any advice for like, people who are interested in joining but might have those reservations about like trying jiu-jitsu during these times?
Yeah, this is a tricky time, obviously, to jump in and get started, because I know many folks had different opinions, ideas around COVID and the whole vaccination process in general, right? So I guess my advice, certainly I went ahead and got vaccinated and encourage those others to consider doing so if they haven't already. But yeah, I mean, I think as long as you sort of keep that in mind, getting started with jujitsu, I think is something that I would encourage everyone to do. It's all of the benefits that me come from jujitsu have been super valuable in my growth, not only personally but professionally. From again some of the discipline aspects of it to some of the camaraderie in meeting some of the different people you meet in jujitsu have all been huge benefits to me in my lifestyle. And so, I want to make sure I share that, encourage others to hopefully benefit from that. And I'm sure, and one of the things that I probably regret most is not starting earlier.
Right. We all see
A
that.
lot of guys that are coming to train at Roll Star now are in their 20s, man. And I look back and think, what was I doing in my 20s? I could have been training jiu-jitsu. I was probably too busy strolling and doing the frat thing, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But I probably could have used some of that time as well to train and start training a little bit earlier. But yeah, I mean, I think I would encourage, parents, obviously, to consider the vaccination process, and then beyond that, being comfortable in the environment that their kids are going to train in, right? And so if I was looking to enroll my child in a school, I probably want to know a little bit more about the school. What are some of the steps they're taking to try and keep folks safe, while training in the environment? Are they limiting class size? Are they taking temperatures? Are they doing anything from that aspect to just try to be as preventative as possible? Would all be aspects that I would consider. But beyond that, I mean, again, I couldn't stress it enough to, at least have folks try it, right? Jiu-jitsu is not for everybody, but I will certainly recommend that if you're interested in martial arts and curious about jiu-jitsu, sign up for a trial class, check it out, because I think for me, that's all it took to get me hooked. And as I've talked to others, that's something that was kind of the first step in the journey, right? Is just getting that trial class under your belt, and just enjoying that experience and wanting to learn more about it.
Awesome.
A big thing you mentioned, that guys are, a lot younger starting, and they have so much information. And we talk about this all the time when we're in classes and stuff. They have a lot more resources, a lot more information that they can access. And it's becoming a little bit more widespread. When it comes to competition, do you feel that it is, and we encourage it for everyone, right? Because we think that it's a benefit. Your thoughts on that? When it comes to competing, from beginner all the way, obviously, to black belt. Like, what are your thoughts on those things?
I think competing is a huge aspect of it. And that's one of the things that, I think Shaolin helped sort of push onto me, right? I don't know that I would have competed necessarily had he not sort of put the battery in my back to do so. But I truly believe that, if you're training on a consistent basis, competition is one of the most important things you can do to kind of test your jiu-jitsu and just to test yourself and challenge yourself in general, right? Oftentimes, as you continue to train and roll at a school, you always have challenging roles in the school, but there's nothing that can sort of simulate the competition aspect and environment of it until you actually do one, right? Until you actually have somebody that you don't know, that you've never trained with, coming at you 110%, with something on the line, right? As far as trying to win a medal and place in the tournament. That's truly when you get put to the test, and that's when you see whether or not you know the technique. Because in class, it's just not the same, right? You can roll 4 or 5 times in class, but once you have that one competition roll, you quickly realize that, wow, this is a lot different. And so it's learning to be able to endure that and to overcome it, I think is a huge part of your development. I know for me, my first couple tournaments I lost, right? And so I wasn't ready, maybe I still needed to refine some things. I was in some cases getting good positions, but wasn't able to capitalize on them. I had the right ideas, but just wasn't able to connect the dots quickly enough, right? But with every competition, I started to grow more and more confident. I started to get more and more motivated, right? Because I don't like losing, right? I always wanted to win, right? And so that was always sort of a bittersweet thing where, you would lose, but maybe you learn something from that experience, right? Oh, I need to learn how to be able to react faster when somebody's trying to open my closed guard. I need to be able to start my passing sequences quickly before my partner gets grips and sets up his entire sweeping sequence. So those were all things that I learned, and that I had to kind of push myself beyond the competitions to spend more time and focus on. And then, once you get there, I mean, there's so many other aspects to competing successfully that are a part of it. The dieting and the weight cuts, that was something also that once I had the technique, I still had to master kind of how to get to the right weight consistently and in a way where I'd be able to fight well, because I did have some bad weight cuts over the years, and there were at least one or two tournaments where that affected me. Mentally I was there, I was all about it, but after that first match, I could feel myself sort of gassing a lot faster than I wanted to. Right. And so I had to kind of learn how to deal with that aspect of it, as well as just some of the other kind of mental aspects of it, making sure that I went in there and not being nervous or scared, making sure that I had a strategy kind of going in. I knew whether I was going to pull guard or play the top game. And so those were all things that I think I picked up over time. And now that I'm trying to teach and encourage others to compete, that I'm trying to share with them is start to think about some of those things now, because I think it'll only help you better prepare for competitions.
Now, for somebody who hasn't competed, what would your advice be? Would you recommend that it's like kind of on the fence, they're like you said, like scared, nervous, would you recommend like trying to do like maybe like an open house?
He's asking for a friend.
Yeah, right. I think, yeah, man, you have to, there's smaller tournaments that you can compete in, that I think are a good way to kind of test yourself and where you're at. But I truly think that's the best way to challenge yourself, right? Going to the gym and rolling with guys, you start to get a sense of comfort, when you're rolling with the same guys. And especially, for us, as you start to roll with guys more and more, you start to figure out, what their game is like and what they're doing, what their attacks are like, right? And you don't have that benefit when you go and compete against somebody. And so that's where, again, you're going to get put to the test and truly, see if you know the technique or not, right, under those circumstances. And so I would highly recommend that if you haven't done it yet, you got to just do it, man. Win or lose, you might surprise yourself, right? But in other cases where, if it doesn't go your way, you're definitely going to walk away from that experience learning something. And hopefully, if you're able to use that to motivate you to continue training and getting better, those losses will certainly become wins down the road.
Absolutely. It's funny because I don't think I won a competition until purple belt, man. Mm-hmm. Years in. Yeah. It took a while to kind of make things happen, and it does take a while. I mean, and it's funny because you kind of see people competing, and you'll say like JT Torres and he wins gold every single weekend, or Keenan winning gold every single, but you don't really know the backstory as much, right? And I know for example, someone like Keenan, I don't think he won like a major competition until later on in purple belt when he moved down to Maryland. So it takes time, definitely. I think it definitely, I agree with you with that. It takes time, but the investment that you put in to that whole aspect of getting ready, competing is worth it, because you kind of you find out a little bit more about yourself at that point. So
definitely.
Those, I guess, because we never say losses, we say learning, experience. Like how did you overcome that? Because like me, like I get frustrated easily. I don't like to lose at all. So how did you overcome like that mental block? Like saying like, wow, I'm getting frustrated, I'm not winning these competitions. Motivating you to continue to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just got to realize that's part of the sport. Like jiu-jitsu is not a sprint, right? It's more of a marathon. It takes a long time, and some people are able to connect the dots faster than others, right? You look at somebody like a Shaolin, got his black belt in 3.5 years, and became a world champion. That's the exception. That's not the norm. Right. And so you have to realize that, for everyone's on their own individual journey, and it takes time to get better. And sometimes some people have to put in more time than just showing up to class, right? Maybe drilling, or maybe spending a little one-on-one time with somebody to try to explain things a little bit more. those are all sort of aspects of it, and I think you have to remember that if you're going to do jiu-jitsu, right? You don't just show up to class a couple times a week and win every tournament you compete in, right? There's a lot of other guys out there training just as hard as you, and some might even be training harder.
Yep.
And I think you have to just, the most important thing is to focus on your development, and focus on learning and getting a little bit better each day. Right. You should never walk out of class, not understanding or at least learning the technique. Some techniques you learn are not necessarily going to fit into your game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important to at least know and be aware of them. Right. And so, you never want to walk out of class, not understanding anything that was taught that day. Right. And I say that because I was a victim of that early on. Right. Maybe I didn't ask enough questions, and so it took me a little bit longer to connect some of the positions. Because I didn't ask some of those questions early on. So that would be my biggest advice to just get over those humps. It's part of the game. I think you shouldn't limit yourself to just that one tournament loss or that one tough roll. I mean, you got tapped. It's all part of it, right? I mean, if you look at any other professional athlete, sometimes, they score 30 points a game, and then other times they have an off night and then they don't score as much, right? So that's going to happen. And I think jiu-jitsu is no different. There's days where I'm smashing everybody in the room, and there's other days where mentally, I want to be smashing everybody in the room, but my body's just not reacting the same way. And so my rolls aren't as good that day, and I'm not able to dominate. And so it's just part of the game.
Awesome. All right, man. Thank you so much, man. We're at the top of the hour. I know we can continue. I mean, I got a whole bunch more questions that I wanted to ask you, and fortunately, we're running out of time. So we might have to do a part 2 of this, but we appreciate your time. I want to give you the floor. You got 1 minute. Let us know where they can find you, what you're doing. Let us know. Plug it in.
I bet. So again, you can follow me at Floss the Kid on Instagram. Again, I'm training at Vitor Shaolin's in the city, but I'm also teaching at Roll Star Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Hackensack. So for those bros that are again in the tri-state area and you're thinking about giving jiu-jitsu a try, I definitely encourage you to check out Roll Star in Hackensack. I want to quickly plug the Lambdas Who Roll event coming up here in a couple short weeks. I'm looking forward to meeting and seeing a lot of bros during that event. Are there spots left? I'm not even sure. If there are, I'm encouraging any bro who's listening to sign up.
Good. Yeah.
But yeah, man, definitely looking forward to that, to sharing some of the jiu-jitsu, and again, just meeting and connecting with bros in the process. So I want to thank you guys. Thank you, Hernan, Fernando, Diego, for having me. Super excited about it. And you guys, I'm sure I'm going to see at the event. So looking forward to it.
Absolutely, definitely, man. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your time. So with that, man, we'll sign off. Para siempre.
Oh, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you so much.
Sure, guys.
You guys.
All
right. Take care, brother. All right, guys. Last minute thoughts. Fernando, what you got?
I want to say that was very inspirational. Omar kind of like convinced me to try my luck and compete. I'm gonna
do it. Gotta do it, bro.
Do it.
August. We got one coming up in August here, man.
In Maryland, correct?
Yeah.
I think I might. I think that might be the first one. Give me enough time to wait and to get ready for that. Also, I want to say rest up to Jacare Sousa. Like he suffered a nasty injury at UFC 262. Rest up, champ. Shout out to you follow me on my jiu-jitsu journey at Dinky BJJ. If not, you don't care. Follow me on my personal Instagram, Dinky2430. So thank you so much.
Awesome, Diego. Anything?
No, man. Just had a great time. Thank you to Omar for taking this time to share with us, his experience, and looking forward also to the June 4th open mat for LUL. And yes, please follow us at Roll Star BJJ for New Jersey, and our philosophy as well, and support. And thank you, guys.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll sign off. Hopefully, we'll see all bros June 4th. I think we got over 30 guys who've already RSVP'd.
Yep.
So
You can still register though. We still add the registration just because I know some people. Hopefully everyone comes, but there's always something that may come up. So we are gonna continue registering.
So we're excited for that. So if you like what you hear, like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment on it, and just share and help us grow with this endeavor here. So with that said,
Yes, sir.
everybody have a great day. Go train,
Para
Diego.
siempre.
All right, para siempre.
Siempre.